I think on net, it's a disaster. I think the points that you made about those particular tax breaks, I agree with them. They're just a fig leaf, though, for what will ultimately be major Medicaid cuts that'll drop 500,000 Michiganders and millions more across this country off of Medicaid. I just want to be clear, right? We talk about Medicaid as a health insurance program for the poor, but one in every two, every other kid in Michigan is insured via Medicaid. And they're talking about work requirements. I just want you to think about this. Are we going back to a era of child labor and we're going to make kids work for their Medicaid? This makes no sense. The real folks who are going to get the biggest tax breaks tend to be the billionaires who Donald Trump seems to want to give an opportunity every single moment he can. I mean, it's as if the stock tip that he gave them just before he pulled back on his disastrous tariffs weren't enough. Now he wants to cut their taxes. And meanwhile, he's out in the Middle East accepting a gift of what, a $400 million airplane. And like, you got to question, the dude really likes golden toilets. Does this airplane have golden toilets too? I mean, this is just it's a disaster for working people across my state and a disaster for working people across the country.
And I would point out for our audience who may not be able to spot this, I do believe that is a Medicare for All book that is on the bookshelf behind you as we have this conversation. What is then the appropriate way to address issues around entitlements, knowing that financially there's an argument that these are not going to be sustainable for much longer, that there is, of course, an impetus to cut spending, to rein in the debt and deficit. If you were to sit in the U.S. Senate, how would you suggest fixing that problem if you don't want to take away benefits from those who need it?
To me, the real question is sustainability for the average family in Michigan. And I think they're watching as their grocery prices are going through the roof. They're watching as they're worried about falling into debt simply for going to see a doctor. They're worried about whether or not they're going to be able to have a job next year, let alone tomorrow. They're worried about whether or not their kid's school is a place that's educating that kid for the future. And right now, they're finding it all deeply unsustainable. Now, the way that we finance government too often has focused on the well-being of the Fortune 500 rather than the well-being of the 350 million of us who make this country what it is. And so to me, my vision for government is one where the everyday American worker understands that their life in the richest, most powerful country in the world is, in fact, sustainable. And that we need to make decisions about where we invest our dollars to be building toward that sustainability. To everybody watching, to me, we all know that the engine of an economy is people, right? It's people having incredible ideas and opportunities to build that. And to me, that looks like an economy built on small businesses. It's an economy where rather than passing tax cuts for the biggest companies, we're making it easier to build and scale and grow a small business that takes its wealth and puts it back into the local community. There's just a difference in vision here, but we can, in fact, do the things that we've done for a very long time if we're willing to make decisions about how we right-size our economy. You go back 50, 60, 70 years from here, and you look at when the economy was buzzing the strongest. It's a moment when we used to tax corporations and the wealthy at a far higher rate so that we could actually invest in the well-being of everyday folks. And I think we just need to be thinking and studying our history to go back to that time.
Well, when we consider the economy of Michigan and the workers in Michigan in particular, President Trump argues that one of the ways to bring about that kind of renaissance, to be reinvesting in the U.S. economy, is the imposition of tariffs, which we have seen on things like autos and which actually have been welcomed by many workers in the auto sector, if not the companies themselves, people who would, if you were to be a Michigan senator, be your constituents. And I wonder, and I've asked this of one of your opponents, Mallory McMorrow, as well, what your message would be to those who feel like the trade policies of President Trump actually do serve to benefit them.
Yeah, I want to be clear about something. NAFTA has been a disaster for working people across our state. It's hollowed out towns. It's destroyed a whole way of life for folks in Michigan. And so the way I think about it, and forgive me, I'm a doctor, so offer me an analogy here. I think about it like a cancer. And if you want to treat cancer, everybody knows that you need a bit of chemotherapy. Now, the thing about chemotherapy is that it's a poison. So you use it very, very sparingly. You use it in a very directed way, and you're constantly tracking what the impact is because, of course, you want to kill the tumor, the cancer, before it hurts the patient too much. Now, if you think about tariffs as that chemotherapy, right, then the way you'd want to do this is to be really thoughtful about the kind of industries that you want to invest in. You make those investments, you let your trading partners know that you're going to be tariffing around these particular industries. You set a set of benchmarks, and then as those companies meet those benchmarks, you start to pull away, always telegraphing what it is you're going to do. But the thing about Donald Trump is that he gets the right problem, and then his solution is always ham-handed, it's always chaotic, and it's always self-serving, which is exactly what we saw with this iteration of tariffs. So while tariffs themselves can be a useful tool like chemotherapy to treat cancer, the way that he's gone about to do it is really more about accruing power with corporate CEOs and bringing them to heel than it is about actually addressing the problem, as we see with the fact that he's now blinked and we're kind of back to square one. And you got to ask yourself, what did we achieve here, aside from more inflation and the destruction of thousands of small businesses across our state and our country?
Well, we did just hear from President Trump talking in part about his tariff policy at the Saudi-U.S. Investment Forum in Riyadh, but he used his time to touch on a number of subjects as well, including the ongoing conflict between Israel and Hamas in Gaza. We obviously are paying close attention to whether Israel potentially escalates things in Gaza even further. And knowing what a flashpoint that was as an issue in Michigan in particular in 2024, I wonder if you're anticipating the same thing in 2026.
Michiganders of all stripes, they'll drop their kids off at school or their grandkids off at school. They look at that school and they say, man, that place doesn't look much different than it did 30 years ago when I went there. I wonder what a couple $1 million might do for that school. And instead, our government has been doing this thing of sending tens of billions of dollars to a foreign military to drop bombs on other kids and their schools. And I think all of us understand that that kind of investment, it's contrary to what's good for all of us. And so I know that Michiganders would rather us be spending our money here investing in our kids rather than sending them to foreign militaries. And I do anticipate that it's going to continue to be an issue simply because it makes no sense for the average Michigander, and it makes no sense for our country.
Well, and of course, on that issue and others, you are trying to draw a distinction between that and your primary opponents in this Democratic contest for this Senate seat. And I wonder how you're thinking about differentiating yourself compared to those who are running against you, and if this risks exposing through this primary some of the fissures within the Democratic Party right now that obviously has been wrestling with itself in the aftermath of the last election.
I'll tell you this, I got nothing but respect for folks who are running right now to take on Trump and Trumpism, given all of the damage that he's done to our country and its standing abroad, and all the damage he's doing to the lives of everyday folks in my state and elsewhere. That being said, the big difference with me is just that I don't take corporate contributions for a reason, because I think that Donald Trump is actually just the symptom of a far bigger disease, and that disease is the politics that have been dominated by corporate interests and frankly the interests of billionaires. And I think that has led us to a system where the economy doesn't work for working people, where we can't guarantee people health care, where our air, water, and soil get corrupted by the interests of a few very, very large corporations. I think we can do better. And so what you're going to hear from me is somebody who's taking the time to listen to everyday folks and talking very clearly about the kinds of policy solutions to take on monopolies that are raising the price of our groceries, or to address the way that big tech is corrupting our minds and our families, fracking our attention out of our eyeballs and eardrums, the ability to guarantee health care for everybody, like the book that I wrote on Medicare for all. And so that is going to be the big focus. And part of me for that is, I'm not going to pull punches when it comes to a foreign policy that has us being first among equals, actually following the rules of the rules-based international order that our predecessors set about after World War II. We got an opportunity to do so much better, to invest in our own communities and to take on the power of the richest, most powerful folks that are leaving us more unequal, angrier, and more lonely and less well-to-do for it.